We're going to look at another special kind of factoring problem called the difference of squares. Difference of squares, you need to make sure you have a few uh, items of importance kind of in order before we actually can do this process. First thing is difference. Difference means subtraction. So you need to make sure that you have a subtraction problem. And then squares, the number in front and behind both have to be a perfect square. So that's where we need to kind of keep in mind this list and not just stopping at 12 or 144, but it keeps going. So keeping those numbers in mind. Okay, so when all that happens, I know that I can do this problem a certain way. So what we do is come up with two parentheses. Now, first thing I'm going to ask is what times itself gives me x squared? X and x. I'm going to put that in the front half of the parentheses. What then gives me 9? What times itself gives me 9? In this case, 3 and 3. That's going to be at the end half of the parentheses. Now, here's where things get weird. Because that's a negative, I'm going to have two different signs, plus and a minus. And if we're not so sure about what's happening here, let's just double check and see if this is the correct answer to kind of understand so we don't have to keep doing the same process over and over again. So x and x gives us x squared. X times negative 3 gives us negative 3x. Distribute the 3, positive 3x, and then negative 9. So what's neat about having a plus and a minus is those two things cancel out, and you're left with x squared minus 9, which is exactly what we started with. So that's good. We factored correctly. This here in blue is, excuse me, our answer. So difference of squares, two parentheses, perfect. What's the square root of that, and then different signs. So let's kind of take a shortcut and do this quicker with this next one. What times itself gives me 16? Well, going to be 4 and 4. What times itself gives us x squared? X and x. What times itself gives us 144? 12 and 12. And then what do we know about the signs? One's plus, one's minus. And we call it a day. You could switch these parentheses and have the minus in the front and the plus in the back. It doesn't really matter, it's just kind of preference. Let's do it one more time. So keep going. What times itself gives you b to the fourth? Well, in this case, b squared. B squared. What times itself gives you 16? 4 and 4. And because it's the difference of squares, we have a plus and a minus. Now, there is a reason why I like to do a plus first and then the minus, is because sometimes I can keep simplifying. And I just like the way it looks when I rewrite things underneath. So, difference of squares. That says addition, don't like that. But here in my answer, I have a difference, and that's a perfect square, that's a perfect square. We can take this one more step. So what times itself gives me b squared? B and b. What times itself gives me 4? 2 and 2. Because it's the difference of two squares, we're going to say plus, minus, and now you're factored. So you always want to do that when you have a minus sign in the middle. Okay. This last one, we don't have perfect squares. 2 is not a perfect square. 32 is not a perfect square. It messes everything up. Unless if we can take something out before we even start. And we can. We can factor out a 2 out of this whole problem. And when I take that 2 out, I then notice inside parentheses, perfect square, perfect square, perfect square, with a difference between them. So now I can go through this process all over again. Bring down the 2, we're going to have 2 sets of parentheses. What times itself gives you x to the fourth? X squared, x squared. What times itself gives you 16? 4, 4. What times itself gives you y to the fourth? Y squared, y squared. And because you have the difference of two squares, plus, minus. Now, are we complete? All of this is good until we get to here because we have another difference of a square, square, square. So we're going to go one more step. 2x squared plus 4y squared. And now break this up one more time. What times itself gives me x squared? X, x. What times itself gives me 4? 2, 2. What times itself gives me y squared? Y, y. And then plus sign, minus sign. We are officially done. And that is factoring the difference of squares.